suggestion that they were going to bring any fight back then, Jim.
That's what he should have done. That's what the director of the FBI should have done, rather than just go along with what he went along with. And by going along with what he went along with, he threw the FBI under the bus and the reputation of the FBI under the bus. And that's what I am very mad about and have been about for a long time.
Here, Democrats and even the president's lines in his own letter about the Russia investigation and the fact that Jim Comey had exonerated him from any, connection to that 3 times. What do you think about that? Because there's the inevitable discussion and pressure that's why.
God damn, son. FBI Director James Comey fired like a motherfucker. Holy mackerel. Looks like we got some new things. Holy mackerel. Looks like we got some new things happening. Breaking news. FBI Director James Comey has been fired. President Trump says today will mark a new beginning. May 9th, 2017. 6 p.m. And I mean, news about this is already raging all across the internet. So, at a very unexpected move, Comey was fired by Donald Trump on a Tuesday meeting. And the statement from the press secretary reads as follows. FBI Director James Comey has been fired, says the White House. Today, President Donald J. Trump informed FBI Director James Comey he has been terminated and removed from office. President Trump acted based on the clear recommendation of both Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The FBI is one of our nation's most cherished and respected institutions, and today we mark a new beginning for a crown jewel of law enforcement, said President Trump. A search for a new permanent FBI director will begin shortly. Damn! I mean, I'm telling you, the news about this shit is spreading like wildfire. Got FBI Director James Comey fired by Donald Trump, coming from Al Jazeera. They got a great letter. I mean, it seems like, wow. I guess he didn't want to play ball with Trump, and he got the wrong end of the ball on that one.
Yes, reporter.
What? Sorry about that. 6 reasons why James Comey was fired from Newsweek. Reason number 1, he hurt the FBI's reputation. In a memorandum prepared by the Attorney General over the past year, they said that he made him look bad. They said that he mishandled the Clinton email investigation, which is, I kind of agree with that a little bit. I think they should have moved a lot farther into that one. He broke tradition? What? He broke tradition with the departure from the department's widely respected nonpartisan traditions. We should reject the departure and return to these traditions. So, nonpartisanism? So what are they saying, he was all over the Democrats? I mean, I guess that's what they're trying to say. In flat words, Trump doesn't like him. Ooh, wow, that's pretty flat out laid out. Simply judging from his tweets, him and Comey have had a rocky relationship. And it looks like Trump was the first to criticize the director online in July after the aforementioned news nonsense with the rig system and all this other shit. So obviously Trump really didn't like the guy. Trump's embarrassed by him. Definitely, Trump's going to be embarrassed because he accused Barack Obama of wiretapping, but FBI Director Comey shut down all of his allegations, explaining Obama could not wiretap anybody's phone unchecked, regardless. And they're also saying that he knows something about Russia, whether he does or not. I mean, that still remains to be seen. I mean, still more live updates. I mean, it's crazy. People are just coming out the woodwork with this. Like, why was he fired? I mean, there's probably a ton of reasons for it, but I guess they probably just needed a good
I
scapegoat.
simply said to him, Mr. President, in all due respect, you're making a very big mistake.
Okay, one large popcorn, couple
Wow,
of
what's
drinks,
up with that?
15.75.
Oh, why are there so many video ads? Anyways, I think Comey's actual Twitter is probably the funniest right here, where it's like Comey FBI 1 hour ago. Awkward. Who to follow? President Trump. Damn, so he hasn't really made that many tweets, it seems, but the ones that he did make, the last one that he did make was this one right here, and that one's kind of sad. I think Snowden actually rang in too, talking about Comey was in fact fired for his July statements on the Hillary Rodham Clinton investigation. Why is the firing happening now, not months ago? Well, obviously, Ben White, it didn't happen months ago because, yeah, that was months ago. So, no more James Comey as a director of the FBI. I mean, it's probably going to be some big fun for some people. This one's going to be blown up like hotcakes and wildfire all over the internet, but I still think it's a little awkward for poor old James Comey. I wonder what the future's going to hold. Damn, son. Damn, son.
Events occurred months ago, and they should have fired Comey on the day they came into office. All of them occurred before he came into office. So that does not seem to me to be a very logical or persuasive explanation. Thank you, everybody.
All right. There is Senator Chuck Schumer of New York with some very strong words about this situation. Let's bring in Judge Napolitano. Let's bring in Karl Rove to discuss what all of this means. Judge Napolitano, let me start with you. For a very long time, you have believed that the testimony that he gave, or the statement that he gave back in July, really should have forced him out of office then.
Yes. I have argued here and in writing that his behavior violated very strong and widely respected regulations of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Namely, you don't make a recommendation to the Attorney General in public. You don't usurp the responsibility of your superiors in public. And when you do recommend no prosecution, you don't then list all the damning evidence against the person that you're recommending not be prosecuted. But the problem goes a little deeper than that. When he sort of affected negatively the public perception of him by exonerating Mrs. Clinton but condemning her at the same time, he also disaffected many, many agents, field agents and agents that work with him in the FBI headquarters. They still believe in, and Jim Kallstrom was quite correct on this, that he demeaned their work, undermined their integrity. And then when the Anthony Weiner Huma Abedin laptop incident occurred, which turned out to be fruitless towards the investigation, reopening it 2 weeks before Election Day, the FBI field agents believe he dragged the nation's premier and politically neutral, priding itself on being politically neutral, law enforcement entity into the middle of a presidential election campaign, a place they never wanted to go, didn't belong, and now we see the fruits of that.
Yeah. Karl, the biggest question here appears to be the timing, because we all know that both Republicans and Democrats throughout the course of this whole process have, sort of taken turns going anti-Jim Comey and wanting him. But the timing of this is what is so interesting and so perhaps political, as you have been hearing from Chuck Schumer. What do you think?
Well, I think Chuck Schumer's just being a political hack. There's obvious reason why it happened now, and that is when President Trump got into office and President Trump began to install officials over at the Justice Department, this matter was turned over to Rod Rosenstein, who is a first-rate individual. He served as a U.S. attorney under President George W. Bush and then as a U.S. attorney under President Barack Obama. He is completely apolitical. He did a superb job in both administrations. He looked into this. I think John Roberts did a good thing by putting the focus in his report on that letter, and I hope people go online and read it. because he lays out the case there, as Judge Napolitano just did, that the rule of law was violated by Director Comey in July. We've had, since the founding of our country, a division between the investigatory power of the police and the prosecutorial decision. We've divided those two, and he took it upon himself in July to step across that boundary without any authority in statute or practice and say, I am making the decision, not the Attorney General, or if she recused herself.
I mean, I can believe that they fired James Comey 100%. I mean, I thought it was kind of weird that they let him stay in for so long.
Should do, which is have a bill of particulars about somebody that you're not indicting. I think he equally violated, as individual FBI agents have told me, the standard and practices of the Department of Justice and the FBI by stepping into the fall election. And in Rosenstein's letter, he quotes from Judge Lawrence Silberman, very respected jurist, from Republican and Democrat officials in the Justice Department, Larry Thompson, Mike Mukasey, former Attorney General, Alberto Gonzales, former Attorney General Eric Holder, former Clinton Justice official Jamie Garlerick, about how he had violated these fundamental rules. And of course, Rosenstein did his review, did his due diligence, presented to the president, and the president acted. And for Chuck Schumer to have opposed and said, I have no confidence in October and Comey, and today be trying to find some deep, dark cover-up, I thought that was a smear and a libel that was unbelievable from the Democratic leader in the Senate.
But, you know, I mean, that's exactly what the charge is going to be from the left. They're going to say, you know, why now? We just looked at the video in the corner of our screen of the moment when the president welcomed a lot of the justice officials to the Oval Office. He called out Jim Comey, come on over, say hi. I want to just play a soundbite that is very interesting, that is from an interview that Maria Bartiromo did recently when she sat down with President Trump. Let's listen to this, and then we want to get Jim Kallstrom's thoughts, and then we'll go back to the judge.
Was it a mistake not to ask Jim Comey to step down from the FBI at the outset of your presidency? Is it too late now to ask him to step down?
No, it's not too late, but, you know, I have confidence in him. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Jim Kallstrom, let me bring you back in, listening to all this conversation. What do you think?
Well, I think he did the right thing. I think if he had done this as soon as he came in, you know, the criticism would have...
As soon as he came in?
...would be the same no matter what. I mean, the Lord himself could make this judgment, and the criticism would be the same. I think it was the correct thing to do to have the Deputy Attorney General, who is a great guy, who I know personally,
who was just confirmed, by the way,
and write the letter that he wrote and give the president the real ammunition he needed to pull the trigger on this thing.
Yeah. Jim, thank you very much. I actually want to bring in Catherine Herridge, who is standing by with some new reporting on all of this. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us now. Catherine.
Well, thank you, Martha. I've spoken to nearly a half a dozen former FBI officials who's told me that people at the Bureau at headquarters here in Washington were essentially blindsided by this decision, and there was nothing this afternoon that was being telegraphed within the FBI that the FBI director was going to be fired by this president. And they emphasized to me that if Director Comey had any advance warning, he would have sent some kind of notification to the entire workforce. They also indicated to me that there were deep divisions within the FBI about the director, that he had become a truly polarizing figure. On this issue of the timing, they back up this assessment that really the timing has to do with something very simple, which was the confirmation of Rod Rosenstein to Deputy Attorney General. He is the one figure in all of this who is not tainted or touched, if you will, by the email case or the Russia investigation. His boss, Jeff Sessions, said that he would not involve himself in either of these issues. So Rosenstein was able to come into office April 25th and essentially embark on a fact-finding expedition here based on the letter he interviewed or spoke with former attorneys general and other senior law enforcement over whether the FBI director had last year colored outside the lines, put on a prosecutor's hat when he was really the chief investigator. Okay, so one of the questions now is,
see you later, Green Mist. Thanks for all that.
And I've spoken with some former agents
in a few days,
who
the
are
frozen
already
giant will
expressing
return.
deep
All right.
about FBI Director Comey's deputy, Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe is going to be
see you later,
a familiar
Green
name
Mist.
to many people because in 2015, Andrew McCabe's wife, Dr. Jill McCabe, ran for state senate in Virginia, and in the process took in excess of $700,000 from state Democrats, including a PAC that's run by a longtime Clinton ally, Governor there, Terry McAuliffe. The FBI concluded that this was not a conflict for McCabe to stay involved later in the email investigation. But my contacts say that that decision alone showed that the culture within the FBI was truly broken, that they did not understand that this at least had the appearance of a conflict of interest. It's possible in this situation that the Justice Department could leapfrog over McCabe. It would be highly unusual, but we're in highly unusual territory, and go to McCabe's associate Deputy Director, Dave Bowdish. This is someone who isn't tainted by the emails or the Russia case based on my reporting, and showed a lot of ability during the San Bernardino terrorist attack investigation. Final point, if I can. So there's already a name that's circulating among my contacts, not as someone necessarily who will be recommended by this administration, but certainly someone who they think would have the ability to step into this role as FBI director, and that's John Pistol. John Pistol was the former TSA administrator, but before that, he had almost a three-decade career
Holy
at the
mackerel, looks
FBI,
like we got some new
and he
things
has
happening.
Strong ties back to Indiana.
Breaking
and the
news,
Vice
FBI
President, Mike Pence, so he would seem to check a lot of the boxes, and we're going to try and get in touch with him this evening, Martha.
Interesting. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So let's bring in Mark Thiessen, former chief speechwriter for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, and Matt Bennett, former deputy assistant to President Clinton and co-founder of Third Way. Gentlemen, welcome. Obviously, everybody is still sort of absorbing this huge story that broke late this afternoon. Matt, let me bring you in first and get your thoughts, your reaction.
Well, I'm struck by the lack of conversation about the fact that the president just fired the guy leading the investigation into whether the Trump team was in cahoots with the Russians. I mean, this is an enormously serious thing. And it isn't just political leaders like Senator Schumer that are making this charge. There's all kinds of legal scholars on Twitter and on television saying that this is one of the most serious constitutional crises that we have faced maybe since Watergate. And it's just laughable on its face to think that the president fired Comey because he felt he was unfair to Hillary Clinton.
That's laughable.
Give me a break. This guy didn't even want to fire Michael Flynn. And the idea that he's going to fire someone because they didn't treat Clinton right during the campaign is ridiculous.
Mark Thiessen.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that is the reason. That is the reason why the FBI, why the DOJ officials recommended that he be fired. I mean, if you read the memo written by the Deputy Director of the Justice Department to the Deputy Attorney General, it reads like it was written by Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton. He said, quote, "We do not hold press conferences to release derogatory information about the subject of a declined criminal investigation." The director laid out his version of the facts to the news media as if it were a closing argument, but without a trial. It's a textbook example of what federal prosecutors and agents are taught not to do. His case for replacing him had nothing. These are all the things that benefited Donald Trump, according to the Democrats. Now Democrats are running around saying this is the second coming of Richard Nixon. It's kind of hard to do that when the reasons were all the reasons you guys were complaining about Comey.
Except, Mark, that's a pretext. What he's firing for now is the fact that he's running an investigation into the Russian connections to the Trump administration. So, whatever the reason, we may never know
to do that.
Well, we may never know the real reason. What we need now is a special prosecutor.
But here's one of the many issues. That call is going to be made over and over and over and over again. And we're going to hear a lot of calls for a special prosecutor. But what strikes me about this is, as you point out, the only time that an FBI director has ever been fired was Sessions under William Clinton. And that was for ethics issues. It was a very different sort of matter. So this is very unprecedented. But one other thing that is very unprecedented is to have a presidential election where both candidates are under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I mean, that in and of itself put us in waters that we have never been in before. So James Comey, because he did not opt to resign when it became very clear that this investigation was problematic, shall we say, as James Kallstrom documented quite clearly, decided to sort of go charter through these uncharted waters and
Woo!
speak out
Damn,
in different
dude,
moments.
so crazy.
Ticking off the Hillary Clinton campaign, ticking off the Donald Trump campaign, making people think that he was very political. I think this is the first time in so long that every American can tell you who the head of the FBI is. I mean, in most cases, they're pretty quiet. They stick to their work. And in this case, he has, you know, for better or worse, become an extremely political figure in this country. So, Matt, is that perhaps one of the reasons why a clean, fresh start was needed at the FBI in this environment?
Look, that's possible, and I do find myself in the unusual circumstance of being on television decrying the firing of Jim Comey, somebody I agree with you, Martha, played an inappropriate role in the election. However, what we're talking about is now, today, what is going on now. And my concern is that if there is not a special prosecutor, an independent commission to look into these serious allegations of Russians' involvement in our election, then we have a real problem.
But the investigative structure for that is still ongoing. That does not change because Jim Comey is not leading it. And in fact, you know, when all of this dies down, he may be very glad to not have to deal with any of that anymore, at least for a while. Mark, one last thought, and then I want to get back to Judge Napolitano quickly.
Sure. No, I mean, the question is, I mean, how does Trump benefit from this? If anything, it's much harder for him. Number one, he's going to have to go and find somebody to take this job. Who the heck wants this portfolio? It's going to be very hard to find somebody to take on this task. Two, he's got to get them confirmed. You just saw Chuck Schumer's press conference. Can you imagine the field day Democrats are going to have with this confirmation hearing? How they're going to use this as a platform for all these political charges against Trump? Yeah. So there's no upside to this for Donald Trump, except that and on top of that, he's going to have to, you know, they're going to be using this for attacks on him and questioning his integrity. So he's got a lot of big things to do. He's got to get health care reform through. He's got to get tax reform through. This is a huge distraction and chaos thrown into the mix.
Difficult. Gentlemen, thank you. Stand by. Let me bring in the judge, and then I got to go to Bill Gavin, who's also on the phone. But I know you're chomping at the bit because you've been nodding at a lot of what we're talking about. What's on your mind?
I've been agreeing with you and with what a lot of our colleagues have been saying. Just because Jim Comey is fired does not mean that the investigation of the alleged involvement of the Trump campaign with Russian intelligence will skip a beat. Jim Comey was, 5 steps above that investigation. The investigators on the ground will actually feel liberated because they will be less political. They will be looking for a clean sort of impression in the FBI that they are not political tools because their new director, whoever this may be, will not be associated with a person who put his thumb on the scale during the presidential campaign.
I want to get a quick thought from you on this. The part of the president's letter where he says, while I greatly appreciate, this is Donald Trump, the president of the United States letter to Director Comey firing him. And paragraph 2 says, while I greatly appreciate you informing me on 3 separate occasions that under investigation, I never the judgment of the Department of Justice that you are not able to effectively lead the Bureau. Parse that for me.
Very, very troubling, and it tells me that there's more here than meets the eye, and I don't know why he put it in there. It almost sounds like one of his tweets. He can certainly conclude, as the President of the United States, that the Director of the FBI is no longer able effectively to lead it, which is what he said in there. But to put in there, by the way, you exonerated me, is almost as if, well, now I'm exonerated and I can't be investigated. I don't think Donald Trump personally is being investigated by the FBI. But if he is, the language in that letter is not going to lift that investigation from him.
Thank you, Judge. All right, let's go to Bill Gavin, who is on the phone, Oh, he's live. Good to have you with us, Bill Gavin, joining us, former Assistant Director of the New York FBI. Your reaction to this big story tonight, Bill?
This is just a phenomenal event that occurs in only once in your lifetime. The very fact that Jim Comey was fired by the president, I feel badly for him, but at the same time, Martha, it's something that had to happen. Jim Comey is a bright guy. He's an ethical guy. But the bottom line is, when he made a prosecutive opinion in an investigative matter, he made a mistake. We all make mistakes in life. This was a big one that was obvious to everybody.
But he claimed that Loretta Lynch had essentially removed herself from that decision by stepping onto that plane on the tarmac with former President Bill Clinton, and that he was basically taking over what he needed to take over because she stepped aside. She left him holding the bag. That's what he would argue. I would imagine.
He would argue that, Martha, but I believe as the head of an investigative agency, even if she called him and said, I want you to render the prosecutive opinion because I can no longer do that, he needs to toss that ball back into the Justice Department to whoever is in charge when she removes herself to make the prosecutive decision. He had an investigation going that was an inquiry, not an investigation. He had no subpoena power. He had no real way to get at what the facts are. But the fact that he made a prosecutive opinion is not the best decision anybody could have made.
Bill Gavin, thank you very much. Good to have you here. So today's firing of FBI Director James Comey is the culmination of tumultuous events surrounding the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, also the simultaneous investigation into the Trump campaign, and all of that wrapped up in the 2016 election. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with a look back at how we arrived at the events of today. Trace.
And Martha, it's very critical to go over the timeline because, as you've been talking about, the genesis of the Comey firing dates back to July 5th of last year when Director Comey held a news conference saying the FBI had completed its investigation into Hillary Clinton's private server and was passing it along to the Department of Justice to decide whether or not to prosecute. But during the very same news conference, Comey concluded that Clinton had broken no laws and instead was simply careless in handling sensitive or highly classified information. Then Director Comey said this, watch.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
Critics accused him of simultaneously passing along the case to the Attorney General and then passing along his judgment. Later that summer, while investigating the sexting scandal involving former Congressman Anthony Weiner, the feds confiscated a laptop belonging to Weiner and Clinton advisor
Weiner. I love it how they call him Weiner.
10 days before the election, Comey writes a letter to members of Congress reopening the Clinton email investigation, saying emails found on Weiner's laptop were potentially incriminating. Clinton's demand that the FBI release all the information they had was denied, and she still believes to this day the Comey letter may have cost her the election. But Comey's October surprise was followed by a November bombshell when just before the election, he writes another letter to Congress saying after further review, the FBI did not find anything new on the laptop. Now, fast forward to last week when Director Comey testified on Capitol Hill about the emails, saying that Huma Abedin forwarded hundreds of thousands of emails to her husband's laptop, including some with classified information. Today, the FBI corrected Comey's statement, telling the Senate Judiciary Committee that only a small number of emails had been forwarded and classified emails had not been forwarded. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. All right, let's go back to Karl Rove, who is standing by. Karl, you know, you had interaction with James Comey when you were in the Bush administration. Take us back to that, you know, sort of debate that was pretty heated involving Attorney General John Ashcroft and how it sort of affected the way you viewed the current, now former FBI director.
Yeah. Well, set the background. There was a critical national security information collection program that needed to be periodically revised, revisited, renewed, and the Attorney General had to sign the renewal. And Attorney General Ashcroft was ill and in the hospital, unbeknownst to the White House. He was so ill that authority had been passed to Comey as his deputy to act as the Attorney General. The president calls up General Ashcroft in the hospital, says we need to reauthorize the program. I'm going to send Andy and Alberto Gonzalez, the White House counsel, over to you. He says, come on over. When they show up, there is Comey, who says Ashcroft is so ill that he's not going to be able to sign this renewal. And if you force him to resign the renewal, I will resign. It'll be bigger than Watergate. It'll be bigger than the Saturday Night Massacre. Now, this kind of program had constant revisions in it. Lawyers from the intelligence community, the White House, the Justice Department were constantly going over this program. So it could have been just as easy for him to call up and say, hey, I understand the president called General Ashcroft. He's so ill, authority has devolved onto me. I've got some concerns. Can I come over and visit with you so we can get this thing renewed? But I've got some concerns that we've got to resolve before I'm willing to sign the renewal. So I've thought he's a hot dog, to be precise. And I thought so in July when he acted in an entirely inappropriate way. I think he also acted as a hot dog in an inappropriate way in October when he intruded back into the election. I don't agree with some of the comments said earlier that he probably agonized over this. I think he liked being in the middle of this. I think he liked being a figure of great public import. I think he liked acting in a bold yet condescending way about resolving a Hillary Clinton situation and then living up to his obligations to let the Congress know that he'd reopen the investigation or the inquiry. So, last week when we saw him on television, all those old feelings about this guy has a big sense of himself came back as he sat there agonizing in front of the American people over what he had done incorrectly in July and incorrectly in October.
I want to take your temperature, as someone who spent a lot of time in the White House. I mean, often you'll get tea leaves, there might be something happening with Jim Comey, sending out, sort of some balloons to kind of soften the fall a little bit. This feels very much, Carl, like something that happened very, very quickly. That a decision was made at the president's desk and the letters were fired off. Now, the Rosenstein letter has quite a bit of thought put into it, so perhaps, that one had a little bit of time in the making. But why the rush? Why now? Why the way it was handled, as if something happened yesterday and the decision came down as a result?
Now, we're reading tea leaves, so it's hard to read tea leaves, but Rosenstein is confirmed in late April, seated at the Justice Department, conducts this investigation, takes him several weeks to do so, 2 or 3 weeks, presents the letter to the White House. It's a very powerful letter, I think well-reasoned and well-argued, makes a credible case. Now, how the White House then decided we're going to do it and do it now, I don't know. But they obviously decided to move quickly. The part of this that is well-written, well-sculpted, well-thought-out is Rosenstein's letter. I think the president made a mistake by putting that phrase into his letter. He may have made a mistake by acting so precipitously. We're in the middle of a lot of other big things, but he acted. And as a result, the pressure is going to be on. I think there are a couple of ironies here. I think that the Deputy Director McCabe, it's going to be very difficult not to make him the acting director because it'll look partisan. Sure, his wife ran for office as a Democrat. Sure, he's a career guy close to Comey.
The Trump campaign and the Russians, we don't know that. We don't know what evidence the FBI has.
So you're basically saying you would have wanted him to be fired, but once Trump
God, that guy looks so fucked up.
And Comey was investigating, you did not want him fired.
He shouldn't be. He can't. He's the only possibility, or he was the only possibility that we saw of an honest investigation. The House and Senate investigations have not staffed up. They're proceeding at a mile a year because there's no staff. The Benghazi investigation had a huge staff, but the leadership, the Republican leadership of the House and Senate, don't want a serious investigation because they're putting, as shown by the fact that there's no additional staff to staff it. So the only hope for it to get to the bottom of what was the most egregious interference in an American election, to subvert an American election by foreign power, was the FBI investigation, which, as far as we can tell, was going forward well. And now we cannot believe the honesty of any investigation.
Jason, let me give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, so Congressman, are you saying right now that you're flip-flopping and you think that Director Comey should have remained in his position? Because you wanted him, so you're absolutely flip-flopping for political reasons.
No, I'm not flip-flopping for political reasons, and I'm not flip-flopping now. I changed quite a while ago because the president cannot appoint and fire and appoint his own investigator. That's the key here. This is the same as when Nixon fired Archibald Cox. You can't control your own investigator. And anybody who believes that the reason that Comey was fired by President Trump now is because Comey was too helpful to the Trump campaign in criticizing Hillary last summer is absurd. Anyone who believes that, I have a very nice bridge to sell them between Brooklyn and Manhattan. I don't believe anybody intelligent can honestly believe that. It is clear that the motive for this firing was to stop an investigation that the president feared. I don't know why he feared it, because we don't know what was going on there. But he wanted to stop the investigation, and the only way that anyone will have confidence that there's an honest investigation going on of possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians will be if there's an independent prosecutor appointed. And if there is not, then we will conclude, and history will conclude that this is the equivalent or worse than the Saturday night massacre by President Nixon.
No,
so what do you say, Jason? I
Congressman-
mean, why not, if the president really has nothing to hide and he isn't involved in any kind of a cover-up, at this point, why not wait till the investigation's over?
Well, why continue to have someone in place who's lost the confidence of the men and women that they're supposedly
We have
leading?
no evidence
I mean, look,
that he's
going back,
lost the confidence of the about what happened last summer are pretext, they're excuses, they're not true, they're further lies from this administration, and the real reason is to stop what might have been, what appeared to be an honest investigation. And the only way to get around that is to have an honest investigation, not under the jurisdiction of the president, and that means a special prosecutor.
So do you think, again, do you think that Director Comey is the only person who can carry out an investigation at the FBI?
I think Director Comey was the only person other than a special prosecutor appointed outside the chain of command of the president who could have done that, yes.
But you thought so little of his judgment last year, you wanted him fired.
I thought he exercised very bad judgment last year, and he should have been fired last year. But once he got into a situation where the person who would fire him is the president that he is investigating, it changes the entire situation, and it makes that firing a part of a cover-up.
And here's what's stunning, Mark Preston. Dana Bash is reporting that the White House tonight. We have Dana. Okay, so Dana, let me go to you, because what the news that you have, and Mark will get your reaction, is pretty stunning. They did not think that there would be a political explosion. They are shocked tonight that this is happening.
That's right. My understanding, according to a source familiar with White House discussions, is that when this was initially going down and made public, that some senior people in the White House did not think that this was going to be the political explosion that it obviously is. And, you know, it's sort of hard for us to believe that this is true, but this is what I am told. And the reason is because of, you know, kind of the talking points that we're hearing from Republicans, because they argue, well, wait a minute, this is what Democrats have been calling for. The argument that Rod Rosenstein made in his long letter is that they fired Jim Comey for everything he did vis-a-vis the Clinton investigation, without one important fact at their disposal, which is why now? And so that is why there's a little bit of a shock, I'm told, inside the White House that this is as monumental as it obviously would have been, and the reaction is the way you know, I think anybody would have understood it to be.
What, Mark, which is but sort of shocking here that they would be so unaware of the bombshell this would drop, that they would miss the, I mean, you know, they clearly tried to make that argument, right? The first paragraph was all about Hillary Clinton's emails. Unfortunately, the record of the tape of the President of the United States shows that to not be his actual point of view.
It's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, you know what's crazy? I mean, let's just remove motive right now from it. Let's assume that there is no nefarious motive behind it. If that's the case, right, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt for this scenario. If that is the case, that means strategically they had no idea what they were doing. They had no idea that this was going to be a political bombshell, that they had no idea that there was going to be a lot of questions directed towards them. They had no idea that they have now just handed the Democratic Party, you know, a whole armful of talking points to criticize President Trump and to try to link him to an investigation that we don't really know what the outcome is. And that in itself is pretty scary. Because the fact is, if they don't know that, then what else do they don't know? And I will say one more thing. What is also concerning on many fronts, this seems like President Trump was acting like he did when he was a private citizen. When you're the CEO of a company, you can do things like this. When you're the President of the United States, there are consequences, there are questions, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Dan, do you really believe, truly, at your core, that this is part of a cover-up, that this is a Nixon moment, or is it just a miscalculation in terms of the timing?
I do believe it's part of a cover-up and a Nixon moment, because if Trump really believed he had nothing to hide, he would have let Comey stay, let the investigation finish, be exonerated, and move on. Now, he will never be exonerated, because the person who will conduct the investigation going forward will be the person he handpicked. Right? The Wizards would not have let the Celtics pick the referees for the game. It will be in question forever. And so you only do that if you have something to hide. So this is a very big moment.
So, Congressman Neller, let me ask you, to Jason Miller's point, though, is there no one that could do a fair investigation that would exonerate the president
there are a
and
lot
his
of pe-
associates at this
there are a
point? I
lot
mean,
of-
could they fix this with a special prosecutor who could do that at this point?
That investigation. But you could paint a scenario, Martha, where Donald Trump, then candidate Donald Trump, now President Donald Trump, potentially has been gunning for Comey for a long time, but really couldn't take any action even as president because Comey's immediate boss at the Department of Justice was not in place. And you had to wait until you got his boss in place, and you had to wait until you got a boss with the integrity and the support on both sides of the aisle, because he was confirmed 94-6, to pull the trigger and get rid of Comey. So I would, if I were a betting man, I'd say this goes back a long way.
When he fired William
prior
Sessions,
to April
only the
25th.
other,
Fascinating.
the only other.
John Roberts, thank you very much. Let's bring. Do you want to make a quick comment, Judge? And I'm going to bring in the panel.
Let me suggest another scenario.
Okay.
That Rod Rosenstein reviewed the Hillary Clinton file, which he had never seen before, and decided that Comey's judgment was utterly irregular and inappropriate, and that maybe she should have been and still can be indicted for espionage, the failure to safeguard state secrets while she was Secretary of State.
All right, we will see. Let's bring in our panel. We'll go to Marie Harf right now and Dana Lash.
What else you got for us, bitches?
Marie, let me start with you. What's your reaction to this news?
Martha, I think I'm still a
Look
little
at these
in
three
shock.
beautiful ass
truly,
women they
truly
got on
stunned by
Fox
this,
News.
and I've never been a fan of Jim Comey, as you know.
It's
but
like
I still
hot,
think
hot.
that this was pretty outrageous, and I'm not sure I buy the argument that the Trump administration was so concerned about how Secretary Clinton was treated by Jim Comey. I'm not sure that passes the smell test. But for me, I wonder if the last straw wasn't Jim Comey's testimony, not the most recent one this week, but the week before, when he was asked about whether or how he felt about possibly influencing the election. He didn't say, I don't think I had any impact. He said, I feel nauseous at the thought that I might have. And we know that President Trump really hates when people, whether it's Hillary Clinton or commentators, question the legitimacy of his victory. And I
didn't take that comment at all like that. I thought he was saying, that the idea, because he felt so strongly that the FBI should not have any influence, and he knew that there had been so many roller coaster moves that made people feel that way, that was what made him mildly nauseous. I don't think he was suggesting that the Trump presidency made him feel that way, but you can
I don't think he was either, Martha. I don't think he was either, but I think instead of saying, I don't think I had any impact, I just wonder if in this long history, as John just laid out from the White House, this goes back months and months and months of President Trump and how he views Jim Comey.
Yeah,
and
but I think the timing
I'm trying to find
Rosenstein.
The reason I'm trying to find some reason here is because the timing is so interesting. Why now? None of us have come up with a
I think
good
that
reason.
Rod Rosenstein may be the answer to that, because he was just confirmed and just took over. Your thoughts?
Well, Martha, I say this as someone who is very constructively critical of President Trump during the primary. He was not my guy in the primary. And I've never been a big fan of James Comey. But is he ever going to win with the left? I think that's the big question here. First, Democrats did not like James Comey. They wanted him out. So Trump now fires him, and they're still unhappy. It's like no matter what the administration does, there's always perpetual outrage. And if anyone thought that somehow the president was removing Comey as a way to cover his backside, well, you have Andrew McCabe now who's stepped up in his place. And I wouldn't exactly describe him as a conservative who's particularly friendly to the Trump administration. So he doesn't, if that was the decision, if that was the motivation for his decision-making process to cover his backside, it seems like that was a poor way to go about it, removing Comey. So I just don't know. When are Democrats happy? They said that the guy was helping Russia at first, and then now it's like, oh my gosh, David Frum, I think, described it as a coup, for crying out loud.
I just want to bring in a piece of information that we just got, which goes to the dramatic nature of this, and it goes back in part to what Maria is saying about the timing. The New York Times is reporting that Jim Comey was in place in Los Angeles already. He was at a big FBI recruiting event. There were TVs in the back of the room, and he learned of his firing when the news started flashing across the screen. So that's a pretty awkward and uncomfortable moment that transpired. And then we saw the firing out of these letters coming from the White House. And we know that Sean Spicer sort of instantly started telling the reporters what had happened. And then we saw the 3 letters which came out from President Trump, a brief letter, then Attorney General Sessions, and then the longer, more, sort of formative thinking letter from Rod Rosenstein. Marie, having been a spokesperson who, brought news to the reporters, your quick thoughts on that?
That is really stunning, Martha. I mean, that is not how the process should work. And whether you like Jim Comey or not, he has served this country, he has served the FBI. I agree with Dana. I've never been a big fan of Jim Comey, although I never thought that he should get fired. I thought he should be a better FBI director. But
yeah, how are you gonna just
fire him?
I've been seeing
some reporting that this has been in the works for
Feels
some time.
bad, man.
If that's true, Jim Comey shouldn't have been in LA and shouldn't have learned about it on the news. That's bad form. That's not how you treat people who've been serving your administration. I'm fairly shocked by that.
Yeah.
Truly.
Dana?
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing rollout. That's the manner in which he found out that he was being let go. One thing that I wanted to bring up, Martha, is I know that there are some elected officials like Justin Amash who are saying, look, we need to have an independent investigation. I think this is really important for everybody, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, to understand. If there's an allegation of some sort of involvement, that Russia is involved to the level that it's affecting a presidential election, then let's have an investigation and let's let the truth bear out, because we can't just go believing something based on accusation. We have to have evidence, and I think everybody's fine with an investigation, but we can't sit here and have these petty witch hunts and be going and having outrage over everything. Like with Comey, I wish that there were some people who would make up their mind. Either they were mad that Trump kept him, they're mad that he's fired. I think that we can all agree maybe there's a better way to dismiss him, but I find the outrage kind of stunning.
Dana and Marie, thank you very much. Good to have both of you here.
Martha.
Let's bring in for one more round Karl Rove and Judge Napolitano. Your reaction to the way he learned the news, if that's true?
I agree with Marie Harf. It's reprehensible that he should have learned about it that way. He is a human being who does have feelings and who did work hard for the country, even though I called for his resignation a long time ago. Somebody should have called him and said, here's what's about to come down. You probably shouldn't be giving that speech.
Which brings us back, Karl, to the urgency of this and the oddness of the way that it rolled out. And you just have to wonder if there was some piece of news, some information that landed in the White House that got this ball rolling and meant that it had to happen instantly.
Yeah, no, you know what? I don't think so. I think we've seen this before. They were ill prepared on the first travel ban. They popped it out without telling the Secretary of Homeland Security that it was coming. They did it at a news conference at the Pentagon where the Secretary of Defense didn't even know what they were going to do there. I think too often this White House sort of acts without thinking it through. And I think they probably got the Rosenstein letter. They got the Sessions input. The White House counsel said go, and the President of the United States said, well, let's do it and do it right now. I don't think this was an effort to embarrass him, and I agree with the judge. He deserved better than this, even though I'm not a fan of Comey's. Anybody who has served our country as long as he had deserved to be told.
Yeah, but I mean, Karl, in this situation, somebody's got to say, well, where is the FBI director right now? There's one story out there that they went over to his office to deliver the letter, and he wasn't there. I mean, that, it's like, can't everybody just sort of take a breath and, maybe get a little bit of an indication to him and get somebody who maybe is out in California who can, say, we need to talk to you right after, the president's on the phone. I mean, it's odd.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, we've got a White House where process doesn't matter as much as it has in previous administrations. In previous administrations, there was sort of a focus, there was an order, there was a process. This kind of thing would have been discussed. How are we going to do it? There'd be people in charge, there'd be a meeting, they'd work it out, and bang, here we get the idea that it just sort of happened. And a lot of things like that have happened so far in the 100 and some odd days of the Trump administration. My fervent hope is that they become a little bit more
Rove is making the rounds,
focused,
baby.
and that they think through moments like this in order to
independent commission to look into the whole.
Mr. Rosenstein should appoint a special prosecutor as soon as possible.
So you see the president obviously saying that he's been assured by the FBI director, the former FBI director, on 3 separate occasions that he's not under investigation. Rod Rosenstein's a letter in which he lays out the justification for today's move, leads with and greatly elaborates upon Senator Hillary Clinton and how that was handled. Do you buy that, or do you believe that that is cover?
I know that my constituents want answers about who knew about the Russian interference. And as I said, Mr. Comey being now the 3rd person that is fired, wonder if every time somebody gets close to this, that somehow, even my colleague from the House who now recused himself from the investigation. So I think what we really need is to have this prosecutor, a special independent prosecutor, look into the details of this. Our colleagues on the Intelligence Committee, as you just heard, both Democrats and Republicans, are not going to step away from investigating this. We are going to get the answers for the American people.
And do you believe that this investigation can continue at this point?
Well, my colleagues in the Senate are going to investigate, and the Judiciary Committee is going to continue to investigate. What we had hoped was that the FBI was going to continue to do their job in this investigation. And
James Comey.
This is very surprising decision, this moment, to say.
In all of these situations, what do you make of the statement?
Well, I'm like the judge. I took it as a positive development, though I have a different twist on it. I think, and I've thought for a long time, that we're going to have an FBI investigation and it's going to come to a resolution. And we don't know where that's going to go. But the public, if the FBI concludes that there's no action, then the public, part of the public is not going to have confidence in that private decision, in that private review, in that they're going to have a greater confidence if there is a committee on the Hill, and the Senate Intelligence Committee is the most likely, where Republicans and Democrats come together in an exhaustive review of all the evidence and come to a largely similar conclusion. And I think Richard Burr, by saying what he said, is going to simply add greater confidence in whatever the Senate Intelligence Committee ends up doing. He and Mark Warner have worked very closely, the ranking Democrat have worked very closely on this investigation thus far. And I think the Senate Intelligence Committee is going to be where we see the adults in charge.
Yeah. A stunning development today. The summary firing of the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I want to thank Judge Napolitano, Karl Rove, all of our guests tonight. But I mean, this development is huge. It will have repercussions that the president will be hearing about for quite some time. Continuing coverage here tonight on Fox News. We'll see you tomorrow on The Story.
This is a Fox News alert. FBI Director James Comey has been fired by the President of the United States. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Comey's departure came unexpectedly, and for a moment you could almost hear official Washington pause, wondering which talking points to use. And then the barking began. Several Democratic senators have already and predictably called the firing Nixonian, as if you were watching something from during Watergate, but you are not. This firing was overdue, and everyone in Washington knows it. Comey recently went to Boston College and said this about his plans to run the FBI. Watch.
Boston College is a leader in thinking and educating on these incredibly important issues. So this is a great place to have it. Hope you'll do it many more times. You're stuck with me for about another 6.5 years, and so I'd love to be invited back again.
Not true, as it turned out. Comey repeatedly injected himself into political matters that the country's chief investigative figure should stay out of. In 2015, for example, he came out against police body cams right after President Obama endorsed them, effectively undermining the president. At the height of the last presidential campaign, of course, he held that famous press conference about the investigation of Hillary Clinton, even though he was simply announcing that the FBI lacked enough evidence to support a criminal case against her.
Although the Department of Justice makes final decisions on matters like this, we are expressing to Justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case. I know there will be intense public debate in the wake of this recommendation, as there was throughout the investigation. What I can assure the American people is that this investigation was done honestly, competently, and independently.
This spring, Comey revealed that the FBI was conducting an investigation into alleged coordination between the presidential campaign of Donald Trump and the state of Russia, In exactly the same hearing, he refused to say if the FBI was investigating illegal anti-Trump leaks in the federal government.
Can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified information, but I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it. And I'm sorry I have to draw that line. I just think that's the right way to be.
Just a few days ago, meanwhile, Comey impugned Hillary Clinton aide Huma Abedin, dramatically exaggerating the number of emails she'd forwarded to her laptop and that of her husband, Anthony Weiner.
She forwarded hundreds and thousands of emails, some of which contain classified information.
Now, at times, both Republicans and Democrats in Washington seemed to appreciate the help that Comey gave them, but over time, his behavior was turning the Bureau, the FBI, into a key political player, and that's the one thing it is not supposed to be. By the end, it just got strange. Often in the course of a single conversation, you'd hear Democrats praise Comey for not indicting Hillary Clinton, then blame him for her defeat in November, and then turn around again and laud him for his Russia investigation in the hopes that he'd be able to bring down the president. Rarely has there been less principle on display in Washington. That's not all Jim Comey's fault, but he definitely didn't help. What this firing ought to remind us is that ultimately real power in a democracy